Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, April 20th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about the COVID-19 vaccine numbers and the fact that now 1 in 4 Americans have been fully vaccinated, which is a very good step and a major one at that towards a new future and a maskless future in the upcoming years. And looking at the vaccines that have been distributed across the United States, I want to talk briefly about how some of these states have much lower vaccination numbers than others and why that might be. We're going to be exploring the amount of Americans who refuse to take the COVID-19 vaccine and discuss why other states might be doing better than others in terms of vaccine distribution. On your screen right now, you will see all of the states with their vaccine shading, meaning you can go from only 23% of the population all the way up to 35%, 40%, depending on the state. And that means roughly these amount of people in this state have gotten at least one dose. This is not a fully vaccinated number, but rather just the amount that have received one shot and then have their second dose scheduled, which will be 3 weeks for Pfizer, 4 weeks for Moderna, and then there wouldn't be one for Johnson & Johnson. So looking around the country, you see a lot of green in red and blue states, but there is a small pocket of light green, a small pocket of what seems to be one of the worst states for COVID-19 vaccine distribution. And looking at the voting results in the 2020 election, they sort of paint a very similar story. You see, we have a number of Americans around the country that refuse to take the COVID-19 vaccine out of fear that it might do something to them, saying that they don't know the long-term effects of the vaccine. But thing is, we do know the long-term effects of our COVID-19 situation. We do know the long-term effects of what COVID can do to you, and the vaccine hasn't really proven to do anything detrimental yet, nor will it probably at all, considering that these companies have a lot of money at stake here. And at the end of the day, you know, the vaccines being distributed around the world have very much been a form of these companies just aiming to make money. That's why they're selling primarily to the United States. And, you know, they would risk their entire reputation. And I can tell you now, they're not implanting a 5G chip into you. But we can take a look around the country. I think that we are doing very well in terms of vaccine distribution. You can actually see here that 39.9% of the entire country has received one dose. 25.7% are fully vaccinated. So roughly 1 in 4 Americans, that is a huge number. You go out into, you know, New York City or rural Kansas, depending on the way the vaccines have been distributed, very similarly actually in terms of the overall percentages, and you find 4 random people, 1 of them will be fully vaccinated, and it's possible that 2 of them have gotten at least one dose. And I think that this vaccine distribution has been very beneficial for our country. And since this is a political channel, we do need to talk about the political implications of it, but I also want to dive a little bit deeper into why some of these states might not have the best numbers for vaccines and the general distrust from the right wing mainly about the vaccine, but also minority groups that are just apprehensive about whether or not this vaccine is something that is either working, or number 2 is something that would be detrimental to different minority groups. You know, for me, I live in Prince George's County, Maryland. That is a predominantly minority county. I know from my friends in school and their families that some of them are very skeptical about this vaccine. They aren't entirely sure as to whether or not it's legitimate. They see these things that come through WhatsApp and different forms of communication from people abroad or people in the States that are just conspiracy theories. And I think it's very similar to those in the right wing as well, because a lot of what the disinformation from the COVID-19 vaccine is just a bunch of these websites, and I've explored them myself, fake websites that are taking the data out of context. They are looking at websites, the self-reporting vaccine website where you can report whether there was a death or an injury as a result of the vaccine, and many of those are fake, and many of them that include death reports that have the vaccine mentioned. You have to understand that none of them have ever said the vaccine was the direct cause of the death. The vaccine was just in the person. And since 1 in 4 Americans are fully vaccinated, if one of them ends up dying, the vaccine will likely be mentioned depending on the circumstance. But that doesn't mean it's the fault of the vaccine. So there's a whole number of things here that I think that the media, number 1, needs to, and the CDC and Dr. Fauci and the White House need to combat this misinformation across many groups, not only conservative groups, which we've seen a general distrust from the right wing in terms of mask mandates, in terms of the vaccine, in terms of everything relating to COVID-19 from the CDC or health departments. And then you also have, on the opposite end, you have traditionally Democratic voting groups my county is a perfect example where you have minority groups that are almost always Democratic voters, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they trust in the vaccine. And it's going to be very difficult for you to gain the trust of the general public when you have around 30% of the entire public saying they're not getting the vaccine. And I think it's highlighted down here in the Deep South. When you're looking at Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee, I'm not surprised to see that they have not covered as much of a percentage as you've seen in Democratic states or some states that have had pretty robust get out the vaccine efforts. Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, these are all states where the vaccine probably could have gone smoother, could have been rolled out smoother. And if more of the people down in these states were willing to get the vaccine, you probably would see these numbers much higher. Looking at them, Georgia is the only blue state out of that bunch, and it's not even a traditionally blue state. It was an anomaly, and Tennessee, as you can see, was won by Trump by over 20 points. Alabama, the same thing. Mississippi was won by 16.5%. Just looking at these three states in particular, very solid Trump margins. But then you're looking at North Dakota, you're looking at South Dakota, Nebraska, Montana, and, I'm not going to treat red states as a monolith. I think that vaccines were also easier to get out in Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota, given that a lot of the rural towns and the counties were able to distribute it themselves and get it out to the people who wanted it, the people that needed it. When you're in the inner cities and when you have a pretty congested amount of people, it's going to be difficult to get everyone vaccinated all at once, which is the case in many places in Alabama or Tennessee or Mississippi versus Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota and Nebraska, much more spread out. And also Nebraska, South Dakota have been states that have been hurt by COVID-19 slightly more than Mississippi, Tennessee, and Alabama. But all around, you can start to see that this is a heat map here. Those solid blue states seem to have the best COVID-19 vaccination numbers. And of course, there are red states under that characterization as well. But I think that there's a general distrust amongst the American public. Even those who have gotten the vaccine are still apprehensive as to whether or not it's going to prove to be detrimental in the long run. And I think that's something that the Biden administration certainly needs to focus on, because if we do want to have a reality in which we reach herd immunity, and this country is on the right track to reopening up to full capacity, to dropping the mask mandates, we do need to reach herd immunity. And we'd rather not reach it through the spread of COVID-19, but rather through vaccination efforts. But for as long as we see these states with the light green numbers relative to the rest of the country, it's going to be difficult, because it's not just here. We have slightly higher levels of green in other states, but it's still not 30% in many of them. And I understand some of them haven't gotten the vaccine supply that they need, or there have been spoiled batches, or just complete mismanagement in terms of the distribution. But that's something that these states need to sort out. But I don't think it's a coincidence that some of these states with solid red histories aren't doing as well as others in terms of vaccine efforts. There are plenty of people that are older that don't want to get the vaccine. I know people personally that should have gotten the vaccine months ago that are just not going to get the vaccine, that are just going to ride it out. And I think that it's very interesting, because you're taking a very at-risk group, but because they might not have trust in the vaccine, they aren't going to take it. And they are putting their lives at risk and also putting other Americans at risk. So let's take a look at this Hill poll from, actually, I don't think it's the Hill-Harris poll. It actually might be. It says the poll released by the Associated Press. So I guess it was not by the Hill poll here, but they say 30% of Americans say they won't get the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, this was back in February. I'm going to show you the updated numbers from just a few days ago, according to Quinnipiac University, but I do want to go through this number originally and compare it, because honestly speaking, it doesn't change much. It says nearly 1 in 3 Americans will not get the COVID-19 vaccine. That 15% of them will definitely not get a coronavirus vaccine, and 17% say they will probably not get the COVID-19 vaccine, and I find that to be very interesting. Now, first of all, to reach herd immunity, we don't have a concrete number as to what we need to reach. Some people say 75%, some people say 85%. Well, if 15% of Americans are saying we don't want to get the vaccine, you're probably not going to be able to get to that 85% number unless you're getting every single person that is willing to get the vaccine with no exceptions. And, 75% I think is more attainable for the American public, but with 30% already saying that they probably won't get it or definitely won't get it, that is when it becomes worrisome. Now, 19% say they will probably get it, 35% say they definitely will get it, and 13% said they already got their shot. But then it says that people amongst ages 30 to 44, Republican voters and people without college degrees were among the most likely to say they will definitely not get a COVID-19 vaccine. And the reason why I think this 30 to 44 age group is interesting is because I think that this age group has been the most impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of work restrictions, but one of the least impacted by COVID-19 deaths and hospitalizations. So what do I mean by that? Well, I want to point out that the 30 to 44 age group was one of the only age groups in the entire 2020 election that actually swung to the right. And I think that this age group in particular is very interesting. They're not old enough that they would view COVID-19 as immediate risk. They're not brand new, but they're fairly new to the workforce. They're, getting up there. They're still starting a lot of their positions, or they're moving around. And when they're restricted from working, but COVID-19 is not a direct threat, and, they're not in college like younger voters might be, or they're not, just starting out so they can wait a few more months or a year and a half. The people who are 30 to 44 generally will have a job, and they will be, positioned. And then when they're told that they can't go to work in person, or they can't work at all because of COVID-19 restrictions, but then you see not too bad numbers for those who are 30 to 44, meaning they're at one of the, groups that aren't are not as at risk as older voters. Sorry about that. You're going to start to see a general distrust for the health organizations and the statewide governments that are preventing these people from working. So I think that was actually one of the main reasons why this voting group in particular actually swung to the right relative to 2016, despite every single other voting group, age-wise, swinging to the left. I just thought that was interesting and something that I wanted to point out, and I'm not surprised at all to see that ages 30 to 44 were amongst the most likely to say that they will definitely not get the COVID-19 vaccine. It also makes sense with Republican voters. Generally speaking, Republicans were not necessarily too supportive of the mask mandates. What we saw happen in 2020 was that the RNC almost went on. We almost saw a full-on convention with thousands of attendees, and Donald Trump still had rallies. Joe Biden never held an in-person rally. He had car rallies down in Georgia. He had virtual events, but he never held an in-person rally. That's something that Donald Trump and him did different. Donald Trump returned to the traditional style of campaigning, but Joe Biden did not. Now, I want to fast forward to where we stand currently, April 14th, 2021, amongst the general public in terms of the vaccine distribution and the way that Joe Biden is being viewed on in general and for COVID-19. So we see here that 64% of Americans believe that they approve of the response to the COVID-19 virus. I think that, or COVID-19. I think that Joe Biden has certainly done a good job in terms of the messaging and in terms of the mask mandates that he's put in place on federal property, whatever it might be. I think Biden personally has done a good job with handling COVID-19. But when you're looking at the vaccine, you have to understand that some people may approve of the mask mandate and will wear a mask, but might not get the vaccine. So it says here on the Quinnipiac University poll that 27% of the American public plans to not get the COVID-19 vaccine. 68% have either been vaccinated or plan to get the vaccine. So 27% is down from what was 31%, but it's not enough to say that we could easily reach herd immunity. If 27% are saying no, the most we could reach in that scenario is 73%, and that won't be herd immunity. And while the numbers have decreased, and I think that has been due to campaign efforts to combat disinformation and lies spread on the media and through social media, I think that 27% is not good, but it's a step in the right direction, and it's something that the Biden administration needs to recognize. Because as much as Joe Biden wants to remain popular and the White House wants to reach herd immunity, it's not going to be possible without these red states getting greener, without these, even some blue states that aren't doing as good as their counterparts. I think that what we need to see here is that the governors actually prioritize vaccine efforts, that the people in the states actually get the vaccines, and as long as we have people having a general distrust of the vaccine, we probably could never reach herd immunity if these numbers hold. And I think it's a good thing that Joe Biden is saying get the vaccine, that Donald Trump is saying get the vaccine. I think it's good that we have a pretty good amount of people on both sides saying get the vaccine, but it's because of that misinformation about COVID-19 being a legitimate threat throughout the entirety of the 2020 election that questions, for these people at least, why they would get the vaccine. If they truly believe COVID-19 is a non-essential threat, why would they get the vaccine? Seriously speaking, put yourself in their position. If you've been attending Trump rallies, if you've been attending, in-person school, if you don't have a mask mandate in your state so you no longer wear masks in stores, are you really going to get the vaccine if you didn't view it as a threat originally? It's sort of like a question of whether or not you get a flu shot. It's an option at that point, and chances are you probably won't get one if you feel it's not necessary. So looking at the vaccine distribution across the country, I'm not really surprised certain demographic groups don't want them, because either there's a distrust in the government for previous things, or because of the completely wrong spell of information that Donald Trump has given to the American public over the past year, downplaying the virus, openly admitting to downplaying it, and then saying that we need to start reopening up as early as September. I mean, we were talking about opening up now with the Biden administration, but that was one of the main priorities of the Trump administration back in September and October for schools. And that's something that I think was a very dramatic difference, that the Trump administration had a certainly much different future for America in terms of reopening, and a much faster one, which I think resonated well amongst voters 30 to 44, amongst Republicans, amongst those who have been throttled by COVID-19 in terms of their job. But at the end of the day, I do think that the Biden administration is taking a safer approach to it. And now that he's in office, we've seen the vaccines start to ramp up to actually come to a point where we can safely reopen rather than rapidly reopen. I understand that people have lost out on things. Personally speaking, I am not going to have a prom. We are going to have a graduation, but I have only been in school for around a month. So not even a month, actually. Let me think. 2 weeks. So yes, I lost out on a very big portion of my high school career, but at the end of the day, it was in the name of public safety and public health, and I think that comes before anything. And I think that's what the message needs to be with these vaccines. For those who don't even trust the vaccine, I want you to do your own research, and if you don't think it's a real threat, I want you to also understand that you could be spreading the virus to other people. The vaccine is not 100% prevention, but you have to understand that the flu shot is only 40% to 60%. Or that the measles vaccine that you get as a kid is only 88% preventive. The vaccines have had a historically large preventive percentage combating COVID-19. And I think that is something that needs to be understood, that this is one of the best vaccines we could ever have for COVID-19. And I understand that you might not personally feel it's necessary, because younger voters are the least likely to get the vaccine, simply because it isn't as much of a risk as it is for older voters. But you could transmit it to your grandparents or your parents who have even gotten the vaccine. It's a very real possibility that you could get the virus, with the vaccine. And I understand that they may question whether or not you should actually get it. It reduces the risk. It brings hospitalization down to 1%, 0%, depending on the vaccine. Deaths down to 0%. So even if you do get the virus, it helps, and you're helping other people by getting it. It's a concerted effort. We're all in this together. We do need to help people stop the spread of COVID-19. We need to reach herd immunity, and that starts with us. Personally speaking, I am fully vaccinated. A lot of my friends are fully vaccinated. I did not have any side effects, not the first shot, not the second shot. The only thing was that my arm hurt because there was a needle in my arm. But other than that, I have had no effects. Nothing has proven to be detrimental as a result of me getting the vaccine. And I encourage everyone watching this, and all of you are eligible, I know that, unless you're younger than 16, that you can get the vaccine, and I 100% encourage you to do it. I'm not being paid by any of these companies. I don't think that's something that's too partisan to say that you should get the vaccine. I think we are on the right track in terms of the direction of this country for COVID-19 vaccines. 1 in 4 Americans is a very good number, and I understand there is distrust amongst certain groups, but I implore you to do your own research, draw your own conclusions, and if you can, get the vaccine. Any one of them is fine. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my Biden-Harris administration analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.